So I just got back from seeing Halloween Ends, and I'm actually going to give it a sensible review for a change. This is not a Video Nasties review. So, if you're even vaguely aware, the film came out on Friday, I think, and it has divided people quite a lot. And having now seen it, I can totally understand why it's divided people, because it is very different to any other Halloween movie. Not just in the sort of new trilogy, but of any of the Halloween films. It's very, very different, which I'm glad of, because, you know, it's if they were just making the same slasher movie over and over and over again in each installment, people would complain just as much anyway. And my opinion is, if you're going to do a sequel or a remake, you know, make it worthwhile and do something different. Whether it be good or bad, at least there was intention to kind of add something rather than just, you know, more kills. Which is kind of what I feel like the previous film was. I feel like Halloween Kills was just kind of there to make it a trilogy. I felt like Halloween 2018 was quite good. Then Kills just kind of came along, and it was a lot of time spent with characters that I personally didn't find particularly interesting. It felt like a vehicle for special effects and makeup to go ballistic. And, you know, from a sort of silly entertainment perspective, it was enjoyable enough, but it didn't really add enough for me to consider it, you know, noteworthy or worthwhile. Then we get into Halloween Ends, and it kind of overcompensates in a way, because we spend, before anything even kicks off, we spend a very large portion of the film with some new characters who I personally found a lot more interesting than anyone from the previous film. And I feel like it had more to say than the previous film did. I feel like, without going into any spoilers, it kind of delves into kind of nature versus nurture argument when it comes to, you know, people who do abhorrent things and how realistically everybody is capable under the right circumstances with the right stimulus. I feel like I don't feel like they were trying to say Michael was, you know, just a victim of his childhood or a victim of, you know, bullies or whatever, but it's just an interesting spin on you know, a character who we're introduced to in this film. Shut up, CJ, this is not about you. But yeah, there's they do spend a bit too long doing that. I feel like it's it would have benefited from maybe I'm just gonna get the dog up. Come here. Hi. It would have benefited from maybe steering away from that area a little bit quicker than it did. Nevertheless, it just about didn't outstay its welcome. You're really interested, aren't you? Yeah. Laurie is far more present in this movie, which it's always going to be a good thing. And she's pretty well-rounded, I think, in this one. You know, you see her kind of overcoming things from the past while also being concerned for the people around her, and aware of the dangers and what's happening. We see her quite a lot, which is good. I don't think it's a spoiler to mention that there is a final kind of confrontation between Michael and Laurie. That was always going to be a thing anyway. And I've heard people say, you know, it's underwhelming, how disrespectful, but I'm at the point now where I don't know what people want. Like, I found the confrontation to be about as satisfying and, you know, as it reasonably can be. It wasn't over the top, it wasn't explosions and fire and buildings burning to the ground, it wasn't any of that. It was just a one-on-one, you know, kind of showdown. And you know, it did well. It was reasonably well-rounded and enjoyable throughout the whole thing, I thought, apart from, you know, the time spent with the characters could have perhaps been a little bit tipped more towards the important characters in the series, you know, Laurie and Michael. There is a weird twist on Michael's character in this one, which I don't buy into at all. That was the main problem I had with it, was that they did something with him that made me sort of question the whole character. But I overlooked it because the rest of the film stood up reasonably well, I thought. One thing I'm glad was absent was the mob mentality from the previous film. The Evil Dies Tonight, which got cringy as fuck in the last film, is no longer here, or at least it's not in the same capacity. There is still the idea of, you know, how the events have affected Haddonfield, but it's played down a lot. It comes back a little bit at the end, but it's played down through most of the film to focus on the characters that the film wants to focus on. As a result of the way that it's structured, it's not a typical slasher movie, and if you're going to go into it expecting it to be a typical slasher movie, then you're going to be disappointed, because it is not the bloodbath that Halloween Kills was. There are good kills in this film, but you will be waiting for them, and, you know, they're not as lingering, they're not as... I want to say they're not as graphic. It gets quite graphic, but kills felt really, really sort of in your face about it. Which, again, was fine. It was a different kind of entertainment. I thought the music in this film was the best of the new films. I really, really enjoyed it. That, I mean that in the sense of the use of incidental music, the score, and, you know, kind of songs that they put in there themselves. How do I feel about the way that it's concluded? I feel, again, like I don't know what people wanted, really. It's sort of... I just hope they don't fuck it up and make any more, because I'm fairly happy with the way it ended. It could have been better. It did some things wrong. It did some things very wrong, but it did a lot more right than people are giving it credit for. And I've come away from it feeling that, you know, it's ended. Like, as far as I'm concerned, I can't imagine where they would go from this point if they were to do any more. I'm just, do you know, I was talking to my friend Joel about this. I'm just happy that a film that was made, how long now, 40 years ago? 78, roughly. Do you know, it was a film that shouldn't be talked about as much as it is now, Halloween, but, you know, it's lived on, thankfully, because it's a fantastic film. It's lived on through its sequels and its remakes and its reboots, and, you know, however good or bad they were, there's kids now who still know who Michael Myers is, who still know who Laurie Strode is. The kids now are still watching the original Halloween and enjoying it, and I feel like, you know what, if these films have been a gateway into that, into, you know, watching classic horror, into watching 80s slasher movies, that's a good thing. Do you know, I feel like their heart was really, really in the right place, and I feel reassured by that, because in Halloween Ends there's quite a lot of references that don't feel like they're just there to sort of, you know, tick fan boxes and be like, hey, you know, nudge nudge, you understand this. There's a lot of nods to Carpenter, but also specifically to the first Halloween film, which gives the impression that it's made by people who really, really liked the first film. Obviously with Jamie Lee Curtis and John Carpenter being involved, you know, that's a credit to it anyway. But, you know, it feels, as much as it's very different, as much as it's trying to do something different, and as much as it did step out of line a couple of times, it feels made with a reasonable amount of respect for the original. And, like I say, I went into it with an open mind, which is what I'd recommend other people do. Go into it with an open mind, maybe even low expectations, and you might come out of it thinking, yeah, do you know what? That was perfectly serviceable. It's not a hack and slash movie. It's far more character driven than that. Which, you know, depending on what your expectations are, it's either going to be a good or a bad thing. But like I say, I was happy with it overall. I feel like maybe a 7.5 out of 10. Do I think I'm going to revisit this trilogy again? Maybe, maybe not. But if you don't like it, the original is always going to be there, and the original is strong enough and holds up enough by itself that nothing can tarnish that now. And that's bolstered by the fact that kids today are still watching the 1978 version of Halloween and really enjoying it. It's a good thing TikTok does 10-minute videos now, isn't it? Yeah, that was my review. If you've made it all the way through, let me know what you think in the comments if you've seen it. And yeah, more video nasties soon.